In the land of Tamriel, there is a Daedric prince known as Boethiah, a sort of shadow warrior god whose form seems to change with the seasons, appearing male in some stories and female in others. At first glance, one might see Boethiah as an evil god who relishes in the death and betrayal of others. But to the Dark Elves and Khajiit, Boethiah is held in high regard and is considered by the Dunmer to be one of the three good Daedra. Perhaps Boethiah is not as evil as we might think. Perhaps she is worthy of worship, but this begs the question, should you worship Boethiah? Hello, my fellow hirelings of House Telvanni! I'm Neloth, and today I want to talk to you about my personal favorite Daedric prince, Boethiah, and discuss if Boethiah is worthy of worship, or to be more specific, what kinds of people might gravitate towards the Dark Mistress. Before beginning, I would like to thank my channel members Mirak, Sovdark, Connorunda, Nork, and William. And if you would like to see my videos earlier by either 24 hours or even 3 days, then consider becoming a member. All members get early access, and Oathman and Mouth will get shoutouts at the beginning of almost every video. So let's don the ebony mail, wield the legendary gold brand, ignore Elton brand, and get right into the video. Now first, we should probably talk about who Boethiah is, her names, his nature, her philosophy, and his actions. You might have noticed I just switched pronouns like House Hlalu switches sides, and that's because Boethiah doesn't have a defined gender. Well, none of the Daedric princes do, but Boethiah more than most. In Morrowind and Oblivion, Boethiah was referred to as male, while in Daggerfall, Skyrim, and ESO, Boethiah is often referred to as female. This is especially seen in the many names of Boethiah, he who destroys and she who erases being the most prominent examples. Boethiah has also been known as the Prince of Plots, the Goddess of Destruction, Queen of Shadows, Deceiver of Nations, the Dark Mistress, the Dark Warrior, and a few other names. Boethiah is also referred to as Boethra by the Khajiit. Because the majority of Boethiah's names do lean more towards her female aspect, I will be referring to her as female in this video. Now, what is Boethiah's sphere of influence? What concepts and acts does she lord over? Well, Boethiah rules over conspiracy, deceit, secret plots of murder, actual murder, treason, and unlawful overthrowing of authority. These influences are inherently violent and cruel, which is why many people refer to Boethiah as cold, cruel, impersonal, and demonic. And while that is true, I would argue that there are two sides to every coin, and Boethiah's sphere of influence isn't completely evil, especially in regards to the overthrowing of authority. A great example is how the Nedic slaves fought against their Ayleid masters and overthrew them, establishing the Elysian Empire. This cause is seen as justified, especially when we look at how cruel the Ayleids were towards the Needs, performing unspeakable acts against them. However, the Ayleids likely viewed the slave revolt as unlawful and unjust. Boethiah likely smiled as Pelennor Whitestrake himself cut a bloody swath through the Ayleid warlords. The same could also be said for Ulfric Stormcloak's rebellion, as the Stormcloaks are, from the Imperial's perspective at least, unlawfully overthrowing the Empire. Murder is also one that can be double-sided as well. Murder is the unlawful killing of another individual, but what constitutes an unlawful killing differs from person to person. The Morag Tong are a group of Dunmerry assassins that are allowed to carry out writs of execution, the legal and lawful killing of another individual. However, the Altmer, Bretons, and Imperials might see the Morag Tong as a group of barbaric, savage brigands. Even in the game of Skyrim, murdering someone may be beneficial to the populace. The best example is Mogrul in Solstheim, a moneylender who is constantly harassing people to pay their debts. When helping the extremely sexy Master Neloth find a new steward in Drovis Relvi, Mogrul will inform you that he can't collect the debt Drovis owed out of his righteous fear of the all-powerful Master Wizard Neloth himself, and decides that you are now responsible for the debt. But why should you pay him? You didn't ask Mogrul for a loan, and if Mogrul's gonna send bounty hunters after you, what should you do? Well, Boethia would say to assassinate or murder him, as he is a threat to your own survival. And that's the biggest thing about Boethia's philosophy. She encapsulates the mentality of survival of the fittest. In the book Boethia's Proving, there is a quote which summarizes Boethia's philosophy pretty well. "I am alive because that one is dead. I exist because I have the will to do so, and I shall remain as long as there are signs of my handwork, such as the blood dripping from this blade." Now, I know this was a bit of a tangent, but I wanted to explain that while Boethia's sphere is dark and sinister, that doesn't mean she is evil for the sake of being evil. There is a purpose behind her violent nature: to harden hearts and test the mettle of both warriors and common folk alike. Boethia does seem to have a fondness for testing the strength of mortals, and while not one of her spheres, I also see her as sort of a gladiator god as well. This can be seen in Boethia's quest in Oblivion, where you are sent to her realm of Attribution's Share, or Snake Mount, where she has the player protagonist face off against 10 gladiators, each of the various races that live on Tamriel. We also see this in ESO with the Dragonstar Arena in Hammerfell, where you face off against various enemies, and the Maelstrom Arena, owned by Boethia's scion named Fa Nui Ten, whose arena behaves the same. To Boethia, battle is a blessing, and death is an eventuality. To her, there is no better glory than the powerful and worthy striking down those who are unworthy and dust in her eyes. But Boethia does not desire to see everyone killed. There is no evidence of Boethia arriving and burning down villages of farmers. Rather, those who have power should defend their power, and if they are defeated, they are simply unworthy. As a master wizard of House Telvanni, I cannot help but see the similarities between the philosophy of House Telvanni and the philosophy of Boethia. Perhaps Boethia had a hand in the creation of House Telvanni when Veloth led the Chimer to Resdania. But while Boethia does seem to relish battle, she does not care for the concept of honor, as she views it as a coward's tool, a crutch, used by people who can't truly make their own way in the world. So, while combat is virtuous, victory is of most importance, and how victory is achieved is irrelevant, be it open combat, from the shadows, or through a well-placed word. Now, Boethia's philosophy doesn't just end at survival of the fittest, or rather, survival of the victorious, because Boethia has a rebellious nature about her. After all, one of her spheres of influence is unlawful overthrowing of authority. However, rather than explain her rebellious nature plainly, I am going to transition into the various deeds of Boethia, where I'm sure you will begin to understand how her rebellious nature fits into her philosophy. One of the most famous moments involving Boethia is her involvement with Trinimac. Trinimac was the strongest of the Etada, or gods, and after the fall of Aldmeris, Trinimac fooled the Altmer into thinking that tears and resentment were the best response. Boethia despised this course of action and also likely wanted revenge for the death of Lorcan. so she either tricked Trinimac to go into her mouth or simply just devoured Trinimac after defeating him in combat with the help of Mephala. And Boethiah began to talk like Trinimac, gathering enough people who would listen, and began to speak of the lies of the Daedra while still wearing Trinimac's voice. With the help of Mephala, Boethiah, still Trinimac, taught the masses the rules of the Sigic endeavor, how to build the great houses that we see in Morrowind to this day, and what items they need to bury and shun the four corners of the house: Mehrunes Dagon, Sheogorath, Malakath, and Molag Bal. Boethiah also taught the Altmer that followed her how to correctly wear their skin and became the Chimer, the predecessor to the Dunmer. When Boethiah was finished wearing the skin of Trinimac, she excreted what was left of Trinimac, and what was left became Malakath. This story is quite complicated, and there are different perspectives of this event, but you get the idea. And while graphic, I think this story is more metaphorical and less literal. I don't think Malakath is a god made of Boethiah's literal shit, but you never know. Not only was Boethiah able to trick or defeat Trinimac, the most powerful of the Etada and slayer of Lorkhan, but she also taught the soon-to-be Dunmer everything from philosophy to magic to even architecture as well. Now, Boethiah isn't just important to the Dunmer, but also to the Khajiit as well, and is referred to as Boethra to the Catfolk. Boethra is seen as a teacher of the old ways and is a patron to not only warriors, but also rebellious exiles. The ancient Khajiit never directly prayed to Boethra, since that isn't her way, but rather honored her by walking the path and only hiding in order to pounce. In Khajiit mythology, Anu, also known as Anur, exiled Boethra because of her rebellious nature and walked the many paths before returning back to the fold. Boethra also fought the demon king Molag, also known as Molag Bal, alongside Dagon and Meridia, and also defeated Noctra, also known as Nocturnal, by herself. Boethra also supposedly ripped out the first of Magnus's eyes, which is why many Khajiit hold their claws in high regard and use them in combat. If this bit of lore is true, then perhaps the Eye of Magnus seen in Skyrim is the same eye that Boethra ripped out, but that's just a theory. Now, in the actual games, Boethiah tasked the Naarifin with rebuilding her statue at Kartag Point, and also tasked the champion of Cyrodiil with fighting in her arena. However, she also tasked the agent in Daggerfall with slaying a spellsword who Boethiah said was a perfectly charming and charitable ass who had been annoying the hell out of her for years. And in Skyrim, as most of you know, Boethiah tasked the Dragonborn with finding a thrall and sacrificing said thrall upon her altar, and afterwards slaying her previous champion in cold blood for abandoning her. Most people would view these acts as evil and vile, and they are. However, as I said previously, Boethiah does this to harden hearts and steel the nerves of warriors who have the potential to become great and cull the weak, or at least the weak-hearted who keep down the strong. There is also an individual that was present in the Elder Scrolls Legends card game named Lord Naarifin, who was a Thalmor agent that led the assault on Cyrodiil during the Great War. Lord Naarifin was also a worshipper of Boethiah, who wielded her legendary Daedric artifact Goldbrand and sought to bring about a prophecy called the Culling, which was a massive Daedric summoning ritual. The aftermath of said ritual would likely have been similar to how the Imperial City was invaded during the events of ESO. And while I haven't played the game personally, as card games make me want to conjure an arrow into my brain, I don't really think Lord Naarifin was carrying out the will of Boethia. Lord Naarifin is a part of the Thalmor, who are Altmer that live in Somerset, and Boethia hated the Altmerry culture of weeping about Aldmeris and cursing Lorcan's name, which prompted Boethia to eat Trinimac like a sweet roll. Personally, I see Lord Naarifin as misguided, as I feel most other Thalmor members would despise Boethia, or perhaps Boethia had an intricate plot in the works that we will never fully realize. Now finally to the point of this video, should you worship Boethia? Well, this is going to depend on what kind of person you truly are. If you are a farmer or artisan or any kind of villager that doesn't frequent the grounds of combat, then Boethia is most likely not for you. And if you are someone who clings to the concept of honor, there is a likelihood that you may not like Boethia and vice versa. At that point, you're better off at a chapel to Stendar. I also feel that vampires are not the best fit for Boethia because while Boethia doesn't really care about vampires, unlike Azura, many vampires revere Molag Bal, Boethia's rival, especially Clan Volkihar, a group of vampires in Skyrim. But if you are a vampire without any ties to or reverence for Molag Bal, then you might venerate Boethia, especially since a vampire can combine their innate stealth skills with martial combat to create the ultimate dark warrior, perfect for Boethia. If you're Dunmer or Khajiit, chances are you might already worship the Prince of Plots, as such a Daedric prince is integral to your race's culture and faith. And if you're a warrior, be it a knight, mercenary, or nightblade of sorts, I would say worshipping Boethia might be worth it, as having such a model could allow you to strive for greatness. Also, if you are a warrior fighting in a resistance or rebellion, like the Stormcloaks for example, I would say worshipping Boethia might be worth it, since one of her spheres is the overthrowing of authority. Now, you don't have to be a meat-headed grunt that swings a warhammer or charges into the fray with board and sword, as those adept in magic like wizards and battle mages can also worship Boethia as she taught the Dunmer how to use magic. So, if you're a Telvanni like me, rejoice, because this Daedric prince has almost the same philosophy as the Telvanni, which makes sense since Boethia did create the great houses of Morrowind. I also genuinely believe that Boethia is the perfect Daedric prince for you, as in the viewer, as in the one who has played through the Elder Scrolls games. Well, okay, maybe not you specifically, but the character that you play. The Naarifin, the Champion of Cyrodiil, the Dragonborn, the Vestige, and a few more. These characters, in a sense, start from the bottom and slaughter their way to the top, learning new skills through combat and culling the weak like bandits with abilities that you have learned or gained. And you achieve ultimate victory and greatness through trickery, martial combat, magic, or a mix of all these things. Boethia couldn't care less about how you achieved victory as long as it was achieved. And additionally, while Boethia favors the Dunmer and has publicly said so in Oblivion, Boethia is also fair-minded and still greatly respects the other races, believing each has warriors who have the potential to be worthy. Each environment you find yourself in, from the ashlands of Vardenfell to the snowlands of Skyrim, is basically an arena, which is what the people called the continent of Tamriel in the game of, well, Arena. And as I said before, Boethia is sort of a gladiator god. So not only do I think those that relish battle would find joy in worshipping Boethia, but I think the player protagonists are the perfect vessels to also worship Boethia and become her champion. And that's all I wrote, a video where I talk about my favorite Daedric prince Boethia and ask the question, should you worship Boethia? This video was inspired by Fudge Muppets Should You Worship videos, however they only made I think 2, and there are 16 Daedric princes, so if this video does well I may turn it into a series, who knows. So with all that being said, make sure to like the like button, like the subscribe button, and like the bell notification down below to be updated on future videos. And I will see you whenever the fuck I decide to upload again. House Telvanni be with you.
Please, O hero of Skyrim, I shall be ever so grateful.